Good morning and welcome to the Big Buzz Breakfast Club. We're so excited to have you join us this morning as we look back to look forward to make 2024 a very successful year for your organization. I'm Melissa Legowski, founder, owner, and CEO at Big Buzz Idea Group, and we are excited that you are with us. Please do, as we go today, put any questions you might have in the Q&A chat box. And we will be answering questions at the end. We want to make sure we kind of get through our core program, and then we will be able to address any additional questions that are on your mind. And also, if you want to turn on or off the closed captioning, please use the bottom at the bottom of your screen. We do have it set to be included, but if you'd like to disable it, feel free. And then just a little bit, I think I see a lot of friends on the call today, but I do want to make sure that everybody knows a little bit about Big Buzz Idea Group. I am a former executive director myself, and after being able to serve 3 years in that role and not being able to do all the great work I wanted to do, I decided to start a company that could be an outsourced partner for nonprofits in need. And so we are very excited because we know that many nonprofit organizations and leaders lack the time, staff, resources that you need to succeed. So we provide management, marketing, and event services to be able to help you take your organization to the highest level possible. And we feel very honored to be able to work in this space and manage a lot of day-to-day activities so that leaders in the association and nonprofit space can continue to focus on your mission and vision to help your organizations be all that they can be. For those of you who may not know, we do offer the Big Buzz Breakfast Club on the second Thursday of every month, trying to always bring different topics and ideas to the forefront, different panels, different discussions that really can help you understand things in your space that you may not always think about, but are very important. So very excited to have today's panel with us. I have known all of these women in different capacities over the last, some of them I go back several years with. Some of them, Juliana and I have just connected this year, but I think she's doing some amazing things. So on our panel today, we have Juliana Gonzalez-Cressy, Executive Director for Center for Changing Lives. We have Trisha Fusilero, who is an association manager here at Big Buzz Idea Group, and she oversees several organizations for us, including the Rotary Club of Chicago, and she has great experience that she will be pulling from today as well. And Lisa Weitzel, who is the president for the Illinois Association of the Chamber of Commerce Executives. My first stint was as an executive director, and I love that Lisa has this organization and that this organization exists. I did not know it when I was in the space, but she has continued to reach far and wide across the state to try to help Chamber of Commerce executives be just more effective in the work that they do. So with that, I'm going to stop the share and bring everybody front and center. I do want to thank all of you for spending your time with us this morning. I think that one of the things I date myself when I was an executive director because there wasn't as much camaraderie. It felt like there was a lot more competition. It felt very distant and siloed and kind of, it was very alone. I felt very alone, and there weren't as many resources way back when. And so I think one of the things I continue to find is that the more peer-to-peer sharing that there is, and the more we can hear from one another, I think the better it helps us all to be. So I want to thank all of you for spending time with us this morning and devoting time to this panel to help your fellow nonprofit executives. And I'd like you to just start out, if you could all tell us a little bit more about you and the work you do, I would love that. And Juliana, we're going to start with you for that.
Thank you. So my name is Juliana, and I am the Executive Director at the Center for Changing Lives. We are a human service organization that has adopted what's called the Financial Opportunity Center model. We carry a vision to partner with those held back by lack of resources and economic opportunity in order to uncover possibilities, overcome barriers, and realize their potential. So this partnership really exists in 4 main domains of our work. So one is housing and financial coaching. The second is small business coaching. The third is resource development coaching. And we do have workforce development services as well. So those are the four main areas of service. You know, we thrive on the vision of a community where everyone can thrive. And we've been doing this work for, we were founded in 1989. Next year, we're going into our 35th anniversary. So we're very excited about that. And I will leave it at that.
Thank you so much. Trisha?
Hi, I'm Trisha Fusilero, and I have been in association management for about 8 years. I predominantly help groups that have membership-based organizations. And before that, I actually owned my own small business. We did television production for PBS. So it was working for a nonprofit in a way. And through that experience, I got to take advantage of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program, which was an excellent opportunity to meet and connect with other small business owners. So taking some of the lessons that I learned of being a small business owner and applying them now to my association management work is very helpful. So thank you.
I love that. And I think, Trisha, right, that's one of the things that we really thrive on here. I was thinking this morning in kind of preparation for today that, my first go around, I hadn't been trained in this work. I was doing, loved the concept, stepped into it, very little training as most of us kind of get from our board, right? They don't know the intricacies. And I had one business owner who told me like not to run the organization like a business. We were not a business. And lo and behold, as I look back, I think everything we do, you've got to run like a business. Nonprofits are a business. And, the concept is just the status is a nonprofit status. And so you really touched a nerve that I feel very, very strongly about. So thanks. Lisa?
Thank you, Melissa. As Melissa said, that I run the Illinois Association of Chamber Executives. Most states have such a program where somebody is either an individual entity like IACCE or they are perhaps managed by their state chamber, offers such a program for their chamber executives. And our goal is to provide professional development and resources and support for the chambers of commerce in Illinois. We do that through programming, through one-on-one conversations, through lots and lots of phone calls, group Zoom chats, and we're here to support their success in any way that we can. And that's prior to that, I served on my local school board. I had another career before that as well, but that gave me a really strong governance overview, and I have taken that into all the work that I do with our chambers.
Wonderful. So I would like to kind of, we want to look back a little bit. And so I would love to know what impact the pandemic had on your organization and kind of where you're at today compared to where you were before. And, really like, are there any lingering effects on your organization? And so this time, Lisa, we're going to start with you.
Thank you. We were very fortunate financially. We actually grew our membership during the pandemic, and I think that's because we really showed a lot of value by providing felt like daily calls, but certainly weekly calls with our membership and connecting with either state agencies or federal agencies to get information out to our members and information that would benefit them, and then also that they could share with their chamber members. We did a really large PR event and promoting Shop Local, where we created a website and logos and social posts so that chambers could talk about the businesses in their communities who were still providing services during the pandemic. And then we linked them. We still have a Illinois Love Local page that connects to ours. And there were the logos of all the chambers that would link to their pages that showed open businesses and the services that they were providing. We did have several chambers come together who engage in a pretty high level of advocacy, create a group called Chambers All In, again, providing messaging and social posts that they could use, and trying to be part of the conversation at the state level about openings and closings and what that looked like and how it was affecting our small businesses in our communities. So it really, somehow we just managed to position ourselves in a really good space, and it's done, it's changed our programming as we've moved forward. We're doing a lot more content of continuing those partnerships with other organizations and agencies to share out information, not only to help our chambers, but also for them to pass on to theirs. Because as you mentioned, Melissa, early on, with such small staffs, there's just not enough time to know what's going on sometimes and be aware of what opportunities exist for not only chambers, because as you said, chambers are still a business, nonprofit is a tax status, not a business model, but also then for their members. So in addition to the professional development, giving them those resources to grow their own chambers or grow their members' businesses has been pretty impactful on our membership.
I think as we think through that, I mean, I know much of the navigation I did with the programs available to me as a business owner, I mean, came from a chamber that I'm part of. And so I do think that as the world was shutting down and so many small businesses were really being affected, chambers served a critical role in that. So, yeah, and I know there was another organization that we were working with at the time too, that it kind of reminds me of them too. They're in the mental wellness space, and just the communication volume started to be so much higher because the need, right? It was like turning on the fire hose overnight, and like all of a sudden it all multiplied. So definitely, and good stuff coming out of it. So I love what you're saying. Juliana, how about you?
Yeah, for us, it was tough in a lot of ways, but there were certainly a lot of innovation. And so just to kind of reiterate, what was the toughness about that situation was certainly that, the health and wellness of our community was in a very precarious situation given the pandemic. We had higher rates of death, higher rates of cases, talking about the volume of request and need. I look back at our call log. I remember we had that in March, stay-at-home orders from the governor. In mid-April, I looked at the front desk log and saw a 700% increase in the request for housing assistance. Now that's just one sliver of our work. And our staffing capacity at that time, we were 10 full-time people. We did not increase by 700%. And so I was very, mindful about the, workplace fatigue or secondhand trauma that often happens in human service organizations. And so, I was very much leaning into, people first, right? Like, what do we need to safeguard our own well-being while we're navigating the request and need of the community at large. With that said, we also had sunsetted that year, 2020 was a sunset of our strategic plan. And so we went up full force into strategic planning during the onset of the pandemic, and plans changed. We had to pivot. It was no longer a 2 to 3 day retreat in person. It was several long Zoom conversations. And, we were able to really get a magnificent strategic plan that's really charted our course over the next, 5 years. We've also, the innovation was us very intentionally. We always look for ways to get input from the community members, right? Are we relevant? Are we addressing the most current need? What innovations need to happen? And so during that pandemic, holding focus groups and really hearing to what is happening, we were able to just develop this whole new line of services around entrepreneurialism. And so that's, I think, the innovation and the generating of new ideas, during times of crises, some of the most innovative things happen. And so we were able to experience and witness that during the time of the pandemic.
I think it's amazing to hear you talk about doing strategic planning in a time when we had no idea what was coming out the other end. I feel like, you think about it, right? We thought it was going to be 4 weeks. We thought it was going to be 8 weeks. We thought it was going to be maybe 12 weeks, like it kept kind of getting like dragged out. And then by the end, I was like, who knows when this is going to lift? So, I mean, kudos to you. What a big undertaking. And I love hearing that story. Trisha, what was happening with the organizations you were working with in the pandemic?
Well, one in particular, it's the Association of Consultants to Nonprofits, and they started as a Chicago-based organization, but with COVID, gosh, people started finding us from all over the country. And there were all these requests from consultants from all over the United States who said, knock, knock, can we join? And they wanted to learn more. And we just were not set up for anything beyond Chicago. So it was an amazing opportunity, but also a little bit daunting. And kind of like Juliana, I was pretty much a one-man band. So how did I multiply myself? It was hard. So Jill Mizra, who is the president at the time, she said, I think we need some filters. I think we need to look at the opportunities that come our way, and we need to put them through this filter system, and we need to decide whether or not we can tackle it right now, or if we need to put it in a parking lot. So some of those filters were, is this opportunity that's coming our way, does it meet our strategic goals that we had set? Is it within our current budget? Is it within our capacity at the moment? So I can't remember all of them. I think we had 5 total, but or 7, but there were some, and we would run them through. And if they didn't hit every single filter criteria, we didn't do it at that time. But we didn't necessarily say never. We just said not right now, and we put it to the side. So that was very helpful. And I believe the organization is still using that filter process to make decisions.
I love that. I always, we at Big Buzz believe, right? Everything starts with budget and goals and your timeline. Like those are the 3 elements. So I love that you had those goals and that you were really using you were looking at your budget. Is it possible? And sticking with your strategic goals for your organization. So that's wonderful. Kind of moving to what is hopefully a better time. I'm very curious what wins your organization might have had in 2023. I'd love to hear any successes and kind of what they meant for your organization. And Trisha, we'll have you go first this time.
So I love a good process and structure. So there was a lot of time that was spent into putting processes in place, documenting them, so that in the end, we walked away with pretty much a playbook. Now, it was always a work in progress, but it was something that people could refer to and could see the steps and what was needed to accomplish something, so that if someone was out, if someone was not, or sick or vacation or whatever, they could pretty much follow the instructions and be successful. So creating that structure was really one of the biggest wins. I feel like it took a long time to put it all together, but I feel like it was a big win for the organization overall.
I think, when I hear you talk about some of those playbooks too, I think there was a day and time where I know a lot of organizations we've worked with, a lot of organizations I've assisted with, that playbook was it's always a pipe dream. It's like, oh, we'll get to it. And I feel like during the pandemic, the fact that anyone could get sick and be out in a minute kind of elevated the need for those types of processes and what they mean for an organization. And so I think that's really, I think sometimes we undervalue that work, but I think it's really gained in traction that it's even more relevant now. So
I think you need a champion for it. I think you need someone who drives it and then puts deadlines in place. We have a colleague right now at Big Buzz who's great about this. She'll give us structure and a deadline and say, okay, I need to hear this from you by this certain date. And that forces you to put it on your calendar, and you got to get it done because she's waiting for it. So having that champion in place at the organization is really important.
I love what you're saying there too, because I think in smaller organizations, it always feels like there's no shortage of ideas. I mean, this is probably in all organizations actually, but my experience with the smaller ones, right, is that they always want to keep putting more on a small team's plate, and something has to then get taken off if you really want to do that. So I've really encouraged a lot of people I know to always say, like, who on the board can champion this, or who within the organization might be able to take this on? Because I think realizing it doesn't have to always be us that says yes, and being able, I never felt empowered enough to say, like, I'm sorry, I'm maxed and I can't do more. But I think it's really important to be able to kind of put that in place and be okay sharing that information with the other members of your team. So I love it. Lisa, how about you?
Okay, so I want my success to be what Trisha's success was, but I keep making notes, and actually it is an item on our strategic plan, which will sunset this coming year. And I just made a note about finding somebody else to hold me accountable. When you're a one-person organization, it's even probably more important. Not even, I mean, I have a lot of things written out, but if something happened, the old hit by a bus, I don't know. But anyway, in 23, we did a really nice job of taking the programming that had grown out of the pandemic and that we had done prior to the pandemic and structuring it. We did have a board member who said, let's look at making this a little bit more formalized and strategic about when we're doing and the types of programming that we're doing. And we created a quarterly schedule and grew some programming that had begun the year before. We had increased numbers in all of our programming and increased resources. We had a lot of we had lost some members after the pandemic. And I think as chambers were still recovering from the pandemic and still dealing with the fallout of that. But then we grew quite a bit this past year as far as our membership, and had a really nice turnout in all of our programming and our support services for them.
Congratulations. I love hearing membership growth at a time. I think with so many demands on people's time, I think people, like organizations, have to really show the value to their members. And I know some organizations have struggled, but I've been really excited to work with so many people who have expanded their membership and see great things happening. So kudos to you, because I think you do a lot of training and support for those organizations who then support so many others. It's powerful. Juliana, how about your work in 2023?
For us, we've had several wins, I want to say. So one of the things we're very intentional about and that we practice as an institution is really planning for goal attainment in the next year. So we practice a process called Planning Week. We've essentially shut down the office. We gather as a agency-wide sessions over the whole 5 days to work out on our team goals. So the infrastructure that we're implementing is multi-layered. We've got the theory, we have our strategic plan, which embodies a theory of change model. And so we aside from our organizational mission and vision, we have a theory of change vision impact statement, which speaks to community members accessing their both individually and collectively to work towards 3 main outcomes: economic vitality, community well-being, and Black and Brown solidarity. With that infrastructure, we've developed logic models. And so logic models is basically the blueprint. We identify what are the resources that we need in order to accomplish a set of activities, right? So we need space, we need certification, we need strategic partners. Like, we literally as a group, we're planning these things out. We have an organizational logic model, and then each team has their own logic model. And that's something in 2023, going into every team to establish their own, I think is a big win. This logic model has the activities. What are people doing? One-on-ones, digital learning classes, all the things related to each program. There's outputs. What do we expect? It's what we expect once these activities are done, what will be the outcome? Or the output. So we're setting out 80% receive several interactions with their coach. Like, we track certain benchmarks, right? And then we have, in alignment with our broader strategic plan, these short-term and long-term outcomes, and then we have a framework. So our impact framework is really what we expect if we accomplish these activities over the past, 5 year, ongoing over the next 5 years, aiming for economic vitality, community well-being, and Black and Brown solidarity. So I think having that multi-layered infrastructure, we've got the big overarching strategic plan with the logic models and our theory of change. We then have team logic models and team goals. So in that planning week, folks are talking about their work plan as a team. What are they hoping to achieve? What is the vision for their team? What are the activities that they're setting to do by when? So they're structured as SMART goals. So they're very, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound, right? And then we've got individual work plans. So everyone as a member of their team is really thinking about their individual role as they line up with the team and the overall organizational. So it's feeding up, but the team work is done first, and then as people reflect on what is their role, it helps really kind of get that big picture buy-in, and everybody knows what we're working towards because we've done the collective visioning and strategy all together.
Wow. So when did your planning week start? This whole model it sounds like some of it's still kind of, it grew for sure in 2023, but have you always done it?
Yes, we've always done planning week as a full week. I think we now have the infrastructure in a much more concise and strategic way, given the operational agency documents of our theory of change model and strategic plan.
Thank
So
you.
it kind of ebbs and flows, right? It's a multilateral look at how we're achieving the work that we need to get done.
So, and that's big growth. You said you had 10 employees, and how many do you have currently?
Right now we're at 24, and we will be hiring in 2024 about another 5 positions. So we will be hovering at about 30 full-time employees. And that growth happened within about 1.5 to 2 years.
Yeah, I think the need has really increased, and that makes a lot of sense. And for anybody on the webinar who might be from a smaller organization, what I will say is, I think what Juliana just talked about and what their organization invests in with so many people might seem a little overwhelming or daunting. But what I really encourage smaller organizations or teams to think about doing is kind of, skinny down. And I think still the importance of having your goals really set for the organization for the year is critically important. And then whether that be your committees, whoever your teams might be, even if they're not direct employees that you're working with, but your committees, your board, whoever will be leading other charges, I think making sure that they understand how they're fitting into that. And I love how it's then filtering down, right, to the committee members or to the other volunteers that might be supporting in certain places, because you really do need to make sure that that vision is going all the way up and down in an organization to kind of bring everybody as much into alignment as possible. And sometimes it works better than others. But if you're really shooting kind of for that as your North Star, it's amazing what you can accomplish. And I think it helps set intentionality. So yeah, I love what you guys are doing, Juliana. And I think small organizations can learn from it and apply it in their own ways too. So what has been your greatest takeaway through these last few years? And Lisa, we'll start with you.
Member-based organizations need to provide value to their members in order to, and that value has to be relevant, and I think follow that SMART goal strategy so that your members feel that they're getting value from their membership with you, and you can clearly define what you're providing for them, and that will help organizations grow to be able to continue to provide and then identify future needs of their members. And so it's kind of like a cyclical process to just continue to grow organizations. And as long as they're identifying and providing that revenue. Many of our chamber members haven't fully recovered from the pandemic. And so we have to prove that we are providing that value to them in order for them to value their membership with us. And then in turn, they have to do the same with their own members.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. It kind of goes back to, I think, right, people have choices, a lot of demands on their time. So I think especially for chambers, really being able to kind of get through all the noise to your members is a certain, process that really, I think the clarity of that value, and then seeing how you can continue to help set up all of the chambers in the state for success becomes really powerful for you guys. So that's great. Juliana?
Yeah, I would say relationship building is very important, like establishing and building relationships, living in and operationalizing values and principles. I think those are very, very key to the success, and even the buy-in of your colleagues, right? How are we operationalizing and living into the spirit of our values and principles? And so I think all of that is very important in terms of having good relationships, having a good rapport, and being able to live into the spirit and mission of what you're trying to accomplish as well.
I think that's beautiful. When I think back to when I started in this, nobody was talking about values. Nobody was talking about principles, morals, kind of directional compasses of that nature. And I think they're really important in mission-based businesses and organizations, because it does, again, keep you on track. And the more intentional you can be with that, the more successful you can be. So thank you for sharing. Trisha, takeaways.
My biggest takeaway was, just because you've always been doing it this way doesn't mean you have to keep doing it this way. So, or doing it at all. So really stepping back and looking at the process, or, and reevaluating and seeing if it's still worth doing. Sometimes less is more.
Yeah, everything, right? I mean, I think evaluating, because things that mattered before don't matter now. Or like, I know one of our members that, everything had previously been in downtown Chicago. That limited their audience. And when they were able to immediately go to a virtual environment, as soon as the world shut down, they expanded their reach in a beautiful way that they hadn't thought about before. And so now it is a combination, because without that travel time of people in the suburbs to have to get to the city, it really opened them up and made them more valuable to more people. So continuing to evaluate what you've done, why, right? What is the why? I love to think about that too, because if the programs you're running no longer serve value or purpose, if you're, why are we doing this? And so continuing to be evaluating the goals and looking at why, and evaluating the programs and whatnot. I talk a lot about events with that model too. Is it a tweak it or tank it? Like, do you review it and evaluate it? Because organizations can spend a lot of time and money on something that really is not producing the outcomes they want. And just because, right, some people get really attached to an event. That's why I think it's always an easy perspective share, that they get attached to this event. Well, we've always done it, but it's no longer got the attendance. It's no longer, bringing in the same revenue. It's no longer hitting all of the things we used to lean on it for. And so, do we need to reinvent it or change it? Because organizations change. And I know in businesses a lot, they talk about the organizations that really thrive and survive are the ones who morph and evolve. And I think, to your point, Trisha, that nonprofits are no different. When you can evolve, and I know the Center for Changing Lives has evolved in the programs they offer and kind of where they land now with their program offerings and their three, kind of pillars and arenas that they serve. So incredibly important. I'm really glad you brought that up. I would love to know what you are hoping to accomplish for your organization in 2024. And what is your strategy to make sure it happens? And Trisha, we'll have you go first this time.
Thank you. Member engagement. That's the biggest thing. So when someone first joins the organization, how do you welcome them? how do you make them feel? And how do you connect them right away to the other members? And I think a lot of it is some really easy processes that you can put in place. So when someone first joins, introduce them to the rest of the group, highlight them, and whether that's in a newsletter, whether it's in maybe like for ACN, we had a group listserv that we would share and we would welcome people. And it always made me feel so good when people told me that they really felt welcomed and invited into the organization. And then immediately connect them and get them involved if they want to be. But I think that engagement, either working with others to serve on a committee, I think that people sometimes get a little bit shy to jump in that way. But if you can make little bite-sized volunteer opportunities that are clear, and you're saying, okay, I'm looking for an hour of your time once a month. I could do an hour once a month, like that I can do. And so you have to think it through about how you can offer those smaller, pieces that get people feeling like they're also contributing to the organization that they just joined. So member engagement is what I'm working on.
I love that, because I do think it goes back to what Juliana was talking about with relationship development. And if you can get somebody engaged and start to build that relationship right out of the gate, and now you've got potentially 12 months to do it, they're likely to stay. You've now hopefully improved your retention numbers. I know one organization actually sends out a new member welcome kit. And it's branded items that, they're co-branded with sponsors and partners, so that they show that tie, but then it just also, it's a nice surprise, right? I feel like all we get are bills, and sometimes getting things, we don't receive many fun things in the mail. So it's nice when you get a surprise and you're not expecting it, and we hope it helps people get engaged. So that's great. Lisa, how about you?
I think it's building on probably what Tricia said with the member engagement. We've had a lot of turnover in our chamber leadership over the last 4 or 5 years, more so than in the previous years that I've been involved. And I kind of summed it up as we need to continue to meet people where they are and provide the resources that they need, and identifying where they are in their leadership journey, how we can provide the development that they need to get to the next level, and what that's going to look like is my goal for next year, and kind of fine tuning the programming that we offer those leaders.
I think I hear a lot of people these days want to know the path very clearly. So I think that you're really onto something with that, to be able to show that. And it then shows the value of sticking with it too, right? Like why you want to stay engaged, why you want to keep moving up. And I think that can help everybody kind of, when they can see the staircase, know how to climb it. So Juliana, what are you hoping to accomplish in 2024?
Well, we have a huge need for a new facility. So as mentioning the growth, from 10 to 30, we need a physical brick and mortar. So launching a capital campaign, building relationships with our elected dignitary about the need of our new financial opportunity center in their district. Certainly talking to peers who run other organizations and have been able to get a new office space, whether it was a rehab or new construction, just kind of getting acclimated with the process of a pre-development, all the things that need to happen, so that while it may not happen overnight, we're in that path to have a new facility within the next couple of years.
One of the things you just mentioned that I think not enough organizations take advantage of is connecting with your elected officials. Another organization that we have worked with in the past year, it was amazing to me how hard they've been working on fundraising to get what they need for their new space. And it was amazing to me that, when they connected with the elected officials, that they have resources, they have certain funds that are reserved for certain initiatives and needs. And so I think you just hit on something really important, that every organization should really be building up those relationships because you never know when those elected officials might have money that can support you. And a lot of those one-time needs, you know, especially if you can show the need in a community, there's just a lot of being able to build your team and to find those people who can help open doors, help provide, you know, access to capital and get you what you need to succeed. So don't overlook those. So as leaders in the nonprofit space, what other advice would you share with our audience today about how to position your nonprofit for success? And Lisa, we'll start with you.
I would say that you need to listen to the members of your nonprofit community and understand their needs and their struggles, and then how you can offer solutions to their pain points. My husband has a saying that he uses all the time, and people need to know they matter. And I try to use that in all of my work, is making sure that when I interact with our members, what do they need, you know, and need to take the time to listen and have, whether that's a phone call, and just because we're a remote organization, I don't get to see my folks in person a whole lot, but just if you just take the time to listen and then provide those solutions, your organization's going to grow, and you're going to provide that value to your folks because you're going to know what they need. And sometimes they really just need to be heard. Sometimes they need a formal training program, and sometimes they just need you to hold their hand for a few minutes.
I love what you are talking about there, because it's not the same for everyone, right? The importance of really meeting them where they are, like to be able to understand the need. And I think I like to talk a lot about the fact that sometimes we're so invested in our organization, we eat, sleep, breathe it day in and day out. But taking that step back to really listen and connect with the audience, I think matters from the standpoint that they might each be looking for different things. And so, you know, to kind of guide them in the right direction to find what they need, you just make such a greater impact to be able to achieve more. So thank you for sharing. Juliana?
Yeah, I would say to position yourself, the organization for success, I'm going to sum it up in a couple of points. So one is certainly much to what Lisa was saying, you know, listen to the need, listen to your community members, do intentional planning and strategy. The third, I would say, is then live into your own values and your organizational values to keep you on mark, right? So you've got the listening, the intentional planning, and operationalizing your values and principles.
Excellent. And did that exist when you stepped in at CCL, or is that something you've established over time?
You know, the institution had values, right? And principles, not so much principles. Principles are new. There was a lot of, I would say, topsy-turvy time during my entrance into the organization. You know, when I joined, it had gone through 5 executive directors within a span of the year, and I was the 5th. So there was a lot of transition management that had been happening. And, you know, we just had to really double down on, you know, the direction we needed to go, given our mission and vision, you know, double down on the approach to our work, because we do embrace the coaching model. So we do believe the principles around everyone's resourceful, creative, whole, and capable. So this also instilled, you know, a culture of mutual accountability. It just was very important to have the appropriate culture at the workplace to be able to build and work off of each other in a way that is in alignment with the mission and vision.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the culture at nonprofits, right, I think many of us may have come through some toxic environments, some difficult environments. And I do think that changing that culture, it has to be really intentional. And I think it can be done. It may not always be a short-term process, but it's worth the effort, and it helps build the buy-in. It helps foster that teamwork that I think really one of my favorite quotes is always, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it really, taking that time to build that alignment and get that buy-in is so powerful. So thanks for sharing. Trisha, how about you?
So my favorite thing is to say, you need to put your money where your values are. I worked with an organization called AFP Chicago. It's the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the Chicago chapter. And they really lived this because they put into all of their planning a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they set aside budget for training. They set aside budget for hiring. They set aside a budget for things even like honoraria for speakers. They didn't have a big budget, but they put as much money as they could toward it, and they really lived it. So I learned a lot from them.
The value of a budget, I think, really is something that not enough people talk about in the nonprofit space too. I feel like if you're like I was when I stepped in, I had no financial training. I had no idea kind of like really how to strategically look at the budget. I knew logically, you look at what you've done and you kind of, kind of go based off of that. But if you want to grow, if you want to add things, right, you've got to find ways to grow the revenue, because you can't add things on the old budget or kind of on the old model without some intention and some effort. And kind of going back to what you said earlier, the whole evaluation, does something need to get cut so that we can do this? Which one of these things are a greater priority in our overall vision, mission, goals, and really kind of being able to look at that. And so I think as I've revisited kind of budget creation, really being more intentional to get behind that. And I love what you're saying about, if there's something you really want to do, make sure you're allocating the resources to do it, because it's not going to happen by itself, right? So I would love to talk a little bit about, I think, Juliana's done a great job of talking about these values. And I think that, some organizations may or may not have values. This is one of those places where I kind of wish that we could see everybody and they could maybe do a show of hands. But, for an organization that maybe hasn't created their values, does anybody here have thoughts or advice about how they might be able to get started in that process?
Well, I think it goes back to working with having your board meet and make a commitment to establishing values for your organization if you don't have it. The board hopefully is a representation of your entire membership and should be able to identify values with the help of a good facilitator. And then you can also include membership surveys, although as we know, not tons of, only a small percentage of members actually respond to those surveys. And then the values can be, when you're looking at your values, and I think Juliana could probably speak to this better, think about them in terms of aspirational, how, are they values that that you currently have, and that those values that that you should have, and make it part of your strategic planning and or board review every year, and have it included in everything that you do. In the trainings that I've been involved in, we always talk about having those values on everything, on your marketing pieces, on your stationery, on your website, on your business cards, kind of along with your strategic plan on the walls of your conference room, if you are fortunate to have that space. And like you could even restructure your meetings agenda to follow your strategic plan goals or your values. There's a lot of ways to be, sorry, now I've gone off on a tangent. I will stop there.
I was just gonna
Nobody-
say,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
With AFP, we actually did it by drawing it. So we gave everybody on the board a piece of paper and we said, draw what you think are the values of our organization. And it was really interesting to see what came out in picture form. little stick figures. It was fun, but we saw a lot of continuity between the images, and that was how we started. And it was just a fun and impactful exercise.
I think sharing on both of those ideas, the idea of defining them and sharing them out is so important. I do think, Trisha, like the commonality sometimes that you will find is really important. I also think it's interesting because I think when you're looking at your values, to also think about sometimes the things you're not. I feel like sometimes trying to kind of think about what you are or what you represent might be a little bit daunting or hard, but sometimes it's really clear what you're not. And so then you're usually the opposite of some of that too, that I think can be valuable. Juliana, you guys work deeply in this. What thoughts do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that was said is right, but I mean, the piece that I would add, it's very closely tied to what you were saying in terms of your organizational identity, right? You know, that I think those values, like identifying who you are, having the, cross-sector engagement in that process, your staff, your board, people who you serve, your participants, like it's very important in terms of setting the tone for those values. For us, I often, we call ourselves an identity-led organization. We serve the BIPOC community. Our staff are mainly from the BIPOC community. So it is, that kind of identity-led perspective that is closely intertwined with your organizational values. We use the word, we serve a majority of members of the Latinx community. So one of our organizational values is poder, the verb to be able to, or the means also power, right? So there's a lot of intentionality around the word choice for the values and their meaning. And it is a process to make sure that everyone has a common understanding of what it means and how it's being operationalized.
Thank you. I think two things come up for me too, hearing Juliana talk in the standpoint of one, this is a morphing, this is a journey. Like, I think that, it's not one and done. It's not set forever. I think, you can start somewhere and then you can refine it and strengthen it. And you can kind of like get to that word selection, and it may not feel quite right after you try something on. So then maybe you want to kind of like discuss in later, periods of time, later retreats, later discussions, right? Are there better words? Are there stronger words? Is there something that we want to shift? So to know that you can do that and have that process as part of a journey is important. But I also think that the clarity, the power that comes with the clarity of knowing your organizational values and what you stand for, I also think it becomes really instrumental in attracting the right team members, as well as being able to attract better funders. Kind of when you are communicating that out and when you are clear who you are, you start to more magnetically attract the supporters, the team, the people who feel as power or as strong about those items as you. And when you have that team devoted to those morals, those values, I really think that your organization just gains such power through that clarity. So I love being able to talk about that. So I am surprised that I have not seen any questions come in, but I would love to just kind of end kind of with a lightning round of any parting thoughts that you have for our audience, a favorite quote, one last thing you think about being a leader in the nonprofit space, or how to change our environments and just make it better for all. It's an open floor, ladies.
Because we're a professional development organization, what I truly believe is not only do I encourage that growth for my members, but also then for myself. And that we as leaders need to be lifelong learners and continually be aware of what's happening out there, and continuing to improve ourselves so we can better support our members.
Staying on that same thought, I'm learning from my colleagues and from my boss that it's important to rest and refuel. So I'm trying really hard to do that because it's hard for me, but I'll be a better leader and giver if I'm well rested.
Yeah, and for me, both of those two comments are so in alignment, right? In terms of restorative time for yourself to be a better person for your family, your community, your place of work, your colleagues, right? And also that we're constantly evolving, right? We're never we're learning, we're growing. I think those are two, just to complement what's already been said, right? Those are the two things I would also agree to.
I love that. We did just have an important question come in. So while we've only got a couple of minutes, I'd like to try to support this question. How do you address uprising internally? Anybody internal disruptions? And I don't know if internal means kind of within the board or within staff, but I would be open to any thoughts that you have on this question.
Well, I can't address two internal uprisings as far as staff, but as far as boards, well, staff not in my organization, but others, is the first thing you need to do is have a conversation. What brought this to the table? What precipitated this? What are they really? What are they really looking for? And sometimes they want to be heard. Sometimes they want you to be going in a totally different direction. And I think that's when, if you have strong value statements and a direction of work that you can say, if it's an internal issue, assuming that they just don't see that they're aligned with your work, then it's maybe time for a parting of the ways. If it's a board member, that's a little more challenging. And then it's probably having your board chair, your board president be part of those conversations to identify what the real issue is, what's really going on.
Mine is quick. I would say it might kind of struggling with something right now. So if we had stronger policies in place that were written and communicated, we would have something to turn to be able to talk to the person about. But because we don't have them in place, it's really wishy-washy, and I don't have much footing to stand on. So it makes it challenging.
Yeah, and I would add, it's both of those things, and having the conversation to kind of unmask and diagnose what's at the core. What is the issue, right? Is it that there isn't a policy in place? Is it that there isn't an understanding? Is it that there's a different direction that is of interest? Like, because it's just really holding that conversation to understand, is it a system? Is it like transparency? Like, what is it, to be able to navigate differences of opinions or approach, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think everything they've said, and that listening with that different purpose, because what's not being said, right? Like, is there a fear at the core? Is there, I've had cases where board members felt that because something was changing, they wouldn't be needed. And so trying to be able to hear what's not being said and to step aside from the emotion to get to the root of the problem, I think is so important. So I hope that that's helpful. As we are at time, I want to again thank all of you for joining us. And I want to thank very much the ladies on the panel. I thought it was just really great to spend the morning with you and to have this conversation. Thank you for sharing so honestly and openly. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day.